Winking and blinking and nod one night, sailed off on a wooden shoe, sailed down a river of crystal.
Welcome to a very special podcast series celebrating the acclaimed composer Lucy Simon. This 5-episode podcast celebration of Lucy Simon's music begins with a special conversation between Lucy Simon, former Rolling Stone writer, editor, and Broadway producer Lorraine Alterman Boyle, Academy Award-winning screenwriter and book writer for Broadway's Jersey Boys and Addams Family, Marshall Brickman, and finally, legendary singer and songwriter Judy Collins. Let's begin. This is episode 1, The Early Years. Lucy was one of 4 children, Joanna, Lucy, Carly, and Peter. Her parents, Simon & Schuster founder Richard Simon and mother Andrea, entertained the era's leading lights in music like Richard Rodgers, Benny Goodman, Arthur Schwartz, and Oscar Hammerstein in their home. Her father was an accomplished pianist. Her mother had a beautiful voice, so the whole family often filled the big house in Riverdale with music. A school assignment to memorize and recite a poem prompted 14-year-old Lucy to write her first music. Because she was dyslexic, she could only memorize Eugene Field's poem, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod, by setting it to music. Eventually, that song would launch the careers of Lucy and Carly as the Simon Sisters. The rest is history. This podcast supports the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society. Go to bpn.fm/Lucy Simon to make a donation. Thank you for your kind support.
Now where you going and what do you wish? The old moon asked the 3. Well, we're going out fishing for herring fish that live in the beautiful sea. Nets of silver and gold have we said, winking and blinking and nod. The old moon laughed and he sang a song as they rocked in their wooden shoe. And the wind that sped them all night long ruffled the waves of dew.
This podcast is going to be about Lucy's early years performing as part of the Simon Sisters, who had a hit record that was in the Billboard Top 100, I think 1964, Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod. Marshall Brickman, who is an Academy Award-winning screenwriter and Tony winner for Jersey Boys, was in the Tarriers, a folk group at that time. And of course, Judy Collins doesn't need an introduction because she's still performing, and she was in the Village in the days of the Simon Sisters too. So I want to start with Lucy. Lucy, I came across an old interview I did with you in the 70s when I was still writing about rock and roll and music, where you said that Winkin', Blinkin', and Nod actually started, I think, in high school, wasn't it? Or even earlier, 8th grade, when you had to present a poem?
Yeah.
Would you tell us about that?
I had to recite a poem in front of my class, and I'm very dyslexic, always was. So in order to remember the poem, I had to set it to a tune, which I did.
Oh.
I just spoke the poem in class, but then I later taught it to my sister, Carly, and we sang it together, and it became a hit single. The thing I remember about those days was how collegiate we were. It was just such a wonderful group of people that we got together, and it was not, in those days, commercial for me. I mean, I don't know. Who is the owner of the Bitter End?
Fred Weintraub.
Fred Weintraub. Well, he hired Carly and me to open for the Tarriers and Woody Allen, and he paid us $50 a week for how many shows we did. It wasn't a money-making thing. And it wasn't a money-making thing in those days, for me anyway. And Judy, you taught us turn, 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 and I loved that. And Marshall, both Julie and I were, not Julie, that's my daughter, Carly and I were in love with you.
Oh, me too.
But Lucy, you actually came from a very musical family, so you and your other sister, Joanna, were always singing with your mother and everything, even before you and Carly decided to hit the road.
Right. Well, my father was a wonderful pianist, my mother a beautiful singer, and we just always sang. It just was part of our life. I can't remember not singing.
What kind of stuff did you sing around the piano when your father played? Was it pop songs, folk songs, Wagner? What was it?
Most often, show tunes.
Mm-hmm.
Show tunes and Lieder.
Ah,
Lieder,
my
like
gosh.
Prince Schubert? Lieder?
Yeah,
Oh my.
exactly. And then Joanna was in a glee club at school, and she would bring home her music, 3 parts, and we sang those. Like,
Didn't famous people like Richard Rodgers hang out at your house, or Oscar Hammerstein? Wasn't your father, who started Simon and Schuster, didn't he have a lot of show people friends?
absolutely. And I gotta say, one of the biggest influences on my music was Arthur Schwartz, who is a
yes.
very close friend of our families. And he would spend a lot of time and he would sing us all of his new songs.
Will Durant. What about Jackie Robinson? Wasn't Jackie Robinson a neighbor and friend?
Yes, very close friend. So it was an exciting childhood filled with different artists and talented people.
Lucy, what did you and Carly, where did you first perform? Was it in the Village or when you went to Provincetown in, I think it was 62, right?
There was a restaurant and drinking place called the Moors in Provincetown. We started singing there. And then I don't remember the evolution of the Simon Sisters. We just sang, people heard us and liked us. We often sang in people's homes.
Lucy, you and I met because of David Braun.
No, I think it was just because of David Levine.
Well, no, because here's what happened. I know you'll remember this. David was my lawyer, and I think he helped you out.
Yeah.
But he introduced you to me, but then I introduced you to David Levine. I was dating your husband. We went out a couple of times. When I say dating, this was so innocent as not to be believed as any kind of relationship. But there was a party after one of my shows at Carnegie Hall, and I was there and you were there and David was there, and I introduced you to him, and boom, you were married. Within moments. So we met, and I adored you and always have, and we've been friends for decades. In fact, I'll tell you that later when you get down to other things in your career. But anyway, I adore you. Lucy is an incredible writer and creator of musicals. And when she created Secret Gardens, she called me one day. I knew about the songs. I've always wanted to hear everything she writes because she's so spectacular. And of course, and she called me up and said, "Would you mind singing the songs?"
How could I ever know you sang? And it was so beautiful.
Yes, and come to my garden.
Right.
Da, 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 da. And so I got to sing those songs as a preparation for your workshops, I guess.
Backers audition or whatever,
I was beyond over the moon to sing those songs.
Oh boy, how could I ask for anything more?
So Lucy and I have always talked about everything right through the years. And also because our birthdays are close, we always talk to each other around those times in the year. We're May babies, we're Tauruses, of course.
Here's an interesting thing, Judy. I sometimes didn't know whether you wrote something or Oprah.
I know. She said one day, she called me and she said, I was playing the Blizzard, which I wrote,
Right.
and thinking, I just wrote the most wonderful song. Oh, and Lucy has every right, really, to step into that role, because on the show in Aspen, where I was singing a big concert with Christofferson, remember, Lucy was the musical director. It was a big show for A&E, the channel, the television channel. And for that show, I wrote The Blizzard. And for the first time, I sang it on that stage. And Lucy was our musical director. So she has a good right to be an owner in many ways of that song.
Well, we were so close, really, that we often didn't know. I mean, maybe you did, Judy, but I didn't know whether I wrote it or you wrote it.
Yeah, exactly.
Did I write that or did Judy write it?
I think it's interesting that Marshall, yes, both you and Lucy left the Village, went through other incarnations, different things. Lucy did 2 solo albums and a couple of children's albums. The children's albums, by the way, won Grammys for children's albums in Harmony 1 and 2. And Marshall did many films, of course, but you both somehow ended up in musical theater. Marshall with Jersey Boys at first, and Lucy Secret Garden. It's kind of an interesting thing. We don't often find that on Broadway, for instance. Would you like to talk about that? How you ended up doing shows, Lucy, and also Marshall, although you didn't write the music.
I got tired of writing and singing songs that were so personal, so I wanted to get into storytelling. So I got the rights for Little House on Prairie. That didn't happen, but it led the way to my getting the job of writing the music for The Secret Garden. And I was so happy to be able to write for other people. What a gem. For not only other women, but for men, for situations. It was just a joy.
What do you write on? In your head, on the piano, on the guitar? I'm curious.
You know, I write a lot in my head. And then I write singing. You know, I sing it.
Oh, really?
And I put it on tape.
Like most of them.
I'm not good with writing notes.
Right.
Still dyslexic. Can't do it.
Are you musically dyslexic? When you look at a sheet of music, do you start playing from the right side of the page?
I have a very active right brain and no left brain.
Interesting.
And Marshall, how did you end up starting out in folk music? And well, we know you were writing for Dick Cavett and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, what led you to Broadway?
It's all accidents. It's every step I've taken has been to avoid falling on my face. You know, so there's never been any life plan or agenda. But the short version is that a friend of mine who was very involved in the musical theater, Rick Ellis, who at that time was working at Sereno Coyne, which is the advertising agency that handles the advertising for most of the Broadway shows, and he was the creative director. And some guy had contacted him with the catalog of the Four Seasons, and he said, "This guy wants to make a musical." And I demurred, because it wasn't my cup of tea. I was a banjo player and comedy writer. And he gave me the double album of all these songs, Walk Like a Man and so on. And I was knocked out by it. And I was a convert. I drank the Kool-Aid. We wrote it. And before we knew it, it was on. We had no hopes. We had a 400... Lucy will understand this. When we came to New York, we had a $400,000 advance, which is like no advance,
Mm-hmm.
So we depended on word of mouth, God, and whoever. So it was a friend. I was dragged into it.
And you know that I met Marshall in oh my God. It was 1960 in Chicago with the Terriers, and I was opening for the Terriers. So I know
Horn, the Blue Angel. What was it?
It was the Gate of Horn. I didn't ever work the Blue Angel, although I yearned to, but I didn't. So we've known each other all these years. Amazing,
Yeah.
Forever.
Right?
almost as I've known Lucy. The three of us
That's
have
right.
been bonded at the hips for all these years.
Can we get adjacent Adirondack chairs at the home, you think?
I think so.
Music Barn.
The Music Barn, yes, the Music Barn.
Stockbridge,
Yeah.
where was that?
Stockbridge, yeah, Stockbridge. Oh, Dan Saviano? No, what was his name?
Right.
So it's been a long time.
Guys, that was at a time when Carly had this just passion for Odetta. And Odetta
Oh, yes.
Odetta was singing there. And
Yeah.
one night we were at the potting shed, was it? And
The
and
potting shed.
Odetta sat
Yes.
in the front seat where Carly and I were performing.
Mm.
Carly looked down and she fainted.
Oh my God.
Trying to do a solo.
Did you guys ever play at Gertie's Folk City?
Yes, Gertie's Folk City. I came there, and I'm sure that Lucy and Carly must have played the
Probably.
Folk City. I arrived there in 1961. I was the headliner, and I was quite surprised because I'd only been doing this for a couple of years. But it was very word of mouth,
Mhm.
wasn't it? I mean, you know that Odetta's husband, Danny Gordon, was my manager for a couple of years.
I didn't know that. I thought we were all
Yeah.
in Leventhal.
We then went, of course, to Harold quickly after that. But Danny helped me. He got me a couple jobs, not a lot, but it was word of mouth. The clubs at the Gate of Horn. Then Alan Riback would call the people in New York and say she sold some tickets, so why don't you hire her? And I got to the Gertie's Folk City. I was the headliner, and I looked around and everybody was there. You might have been there too, but Peter, Paul, and Mary was there before they were Peter, Paul, and Mary. And Peter used to say, "Now, if this doesn't work out with Mary, keep your schedule clear." and so then I looked around and I realized everybody was there. Really, Ramblin' Jack Elliott was there. Dave Van Ronk was there, and then I was told and I saw that my opener was a 13-year-old named Arlo Guthrie.
Oh my God.
Wow.
So, we know each other a long time.
It's just such a nice community.
It's a lovely community. It is.
So supportive of each other.
Absolutely.
I don't think there was any
Absolutely.
competition. I think it was just all love and
Exactly.
Love and marches against the
I
war
was
in
just going to
Vietnam.
say, love in a very turbulent
I
time.
think that's right.
Exactly.
love
Right.
and turbulent time and no money.
And no money.
But you had fun. And it led to great things for all of you. Thank you. I love you all. You've all been friends of mine, maybe only since the late 60s, but we've all been together and through a lot. So thank you. And I look forward
Yes, we
to
have.
more coming.
Please stay tuned for the rest of the episodes in this 5-episode series. Tremendous thanks to our guests Lucy Simon, Marshall Brickman, Judy Collins, and to our episode host, Lorraine Alterman Boyle. With narration by me, Lucy Boyle. This episode is produced by Dori Berenstein, Alan Seals, and Kimberly Garris for the Broadway Podcast Network. Executive producers are Lorraine Boyle and Liz Armstrong. Associate producer is Henny Konisberg. This series is edited by Alan Seals and Dori Berenstein. Thank you to Victoria Traub, Sean Flavin, and Concord Music for their tremendous support and partnership on this very special project. Find out more about Lucy Simon, how to support the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society, and more ways to listen to this podcast by visiting bpn.fm/Lucy Simon.